Hey, what up, fish?
Leave. Okay guys, in this episode of Assassin's Creed Logic, we're going to be talking about the combat. If there were two words that would describe this perfectly, it's too easy. Unless we're talking Unity, then it's moderately difficult, and if we're talking Syndicate, then it's just about easy enough. Even then, the combat was a bit horrible. You see, Assassin's Creed has had some pretty fast-paced combat in recent years. Sometimes slow, sometimes fast, sometimes clunky, sometimes a bit outright ridiculous. But one thing doesn't make sense. While you're there making mincemeat out of their friend, they have nothing better to do but stand there and watch before making their attack when you've killed their friend. As you can imagine, making for very, very easy combat in most situations. Okay, this issue has been present in basically every Assassin's Creed game. Sometimes you will find enemies attack both at once, but in 3 and 4 there are counters for that and it's great. But however, in some games, several people will attack at once, on a whim, but then again, if the game isn't glitching, only one person attacks at one time. So when surrounded by enemies, they could all fork you and kill you, making the combat harder and more incentive not to get surrounded and not get into combat. They just attack one at a time and make the combat easy, when in reality, it should be a little bit more stealth-based, so combat should be that little bit more challenging than it is, which it really isn't.
Die, assassin! Wait for him to kill my friend first. Okay, Martin's dead, let's kill him.
Again, you don't want them to make combat too challenging, but at the same time, being surrounded by like heaps and heaps and heaps of guards is in reality not going to go your way. I mean, unless you have a skill set that's literally carbon copying mine, and then maybe you stand a little bit of a chance. But in reality, against a bunch of spears, you're about as fucked people. I mean, that's alright for some, because some of you might like that. This will also call for tactics in combat. So for example, you could, instead of being surrounded by enemies, which is just a bad idea, you can get a chase, get into a gap, get a wall behind you and fight your way through enemies. That would make sense. Basically what it does is make you think like an assassin, which in turn will hopefully convey Assassin's Creed feels. I feel as if the first 2 AC games got the difficulty of the combat right, and then Brotherhood got the speed, okay, because you're an assassin, you're going to be speeding, you're going to be skilled in combat, of course. But then again, I just find that mix where it's not too easy, yet not too hard, not too tedious, which sums up Assassin's Creed 3's combat very, very well, unfortunately. And yeah, those 3 things. It needs to be not too easy, not too difficult, not too tedious. Unity managed to fuck up on all 3 points. Somehow they made the combat both too easy and too difficult. And too tedious. And I have no idea how they did it. Oh wait, I know. The game was broken. Okay, now let's talk about Ubisoft's tendency to be changing the engine lately, because they've done that twice in the past 2 games. Unity's gameplay engine was different, and so was Syndicate's, and both of them changed the combat. So they both had the same engine, base engine, so it was a different engine. But I mean, the combat engine was different. So Unity's combat was different to Syndicate's, and overall, they were both kind of meh. There was no real need to change the combat engine from the first combat engine when that was updated to the max in Revelations. Then they changed it to the one for 3 and 4, which was decent, and then they changed it again to the one in Unity's, which was okay. Then they changed it to the one in Syndicate's, which again was just okay. At this rate, we're going to have a really bad combat system in about 5 years. So I hope that they decide to go back to some of the original combat engines rather than, you know, keep going forward to these ridiculous ones where it's just pointless. There is no need to keep changing the combat engine every single bloody year. And I hope Ubisoft realise that and give us a good combat system that's both challenging but not too hard as you are a badass assassin, and at the same time doesn't feel too tedious. However, I really did like Assassin's Creed 3 and 4's combat engine, and they should definitely return to that rather than keep changing the combat engine now, because they can't stick with Unity's because that one wasn't great, and they can't stick with Syndicate's because that one wasn't great. And knowing Ubisoft as a company, they won't look back, they'll just keep looking forward, when in reality they did have a good combat system before. They just need to put in more challenge and they've got the formula for a good combat experience. I just don't see the need to keep developing new combat engines when in reality they've got a really good combat engine that they've just left at the sideline with Black Flag and decided to move on to something completely different. I mean, even back when Assassin's Creed 3 came out, I didn't even understand why they'd changed the combat engine from what it was in Revelations to what it was in 3. I too wasn't a big fan of final kill slow motion shots either. They made the final kill feel so much longer than it actually was, which was really, really irritating because you might want to get on to the next thing, which is tedious when you're going in slow motion, stabbing a guy and they're sliding off like that just didn't need to be there, and that was there in Revelations 3 and 4. In 3 and 4 it was a lot better than it was in Revelations, but the slow motion, although it looks nice, it's a nice gesture, it's unnecessary. However, if it didn't have as much blow when it happened, it would probably look kinda nice. However, it really didn't make sense that it was there, to be honest with you, because all it did was drag out combat by a few seconds in your mind, which made you feel more anxious about getting the mission done, because you feel as if in that time the world is going the same pace. So overall, I think this just needs to be scrapped. And in Unity and Syndicate, if I recall correctly, it was scrapped for a zoom-in effect sort of thing instead, which was, yeah, okay, that was a lot better. So it needed to be scrapped, being the operative here. This made the combat experience feel a lot smoother. Let's move on to my next point, which is something that I like to call forced lock-ons. Now, when you're in combat, or no, when you're running away from combat and you decide to run through it, sometimes you'll be forced into a lock-on, which will make you stand as if draw your weapon and start attacking instead of moving away, which gives them time to hit. But if you choose to run, you choose to run. So there should be a button dedicated to locking on and off like there used to be. However, again, this did happen from time to time, forced lock-ons, but you could basically use this button, unlock yourself, get out of there if you want to run because you're overwhelmed, instead of getting forced into a position where you have to stand and fight, which is just ridiculous. Because I've run into this problem the most in Assassin's Creed, Unity and Syndicate, to be honest with you. However, in Syndicate I had no compulsion to run, and in Unity I had this a lot, and you know, it feels as if being forced into combat is not a good thing for a stealth-based game, or so it's supposed to be, what with Assassin being a selling point. So in reality, that needs to go. The forced lock-ons need to go. I think the combat and the stealth, I mean the running away from combat, needs to be defined a little bit more. So getting rid of the forced lock-ons means you can pull yourself out of the situation and not have to worry about being caught in it, you know, somewhere else or whatever, because that's really irritating. Because it was quite irritating. So hopefully they just get rid of that stupid little feature, and we can walk away from a fight if we want to, I guess. Also, some games managed to do this. Assassin's Creed Syndicate did do it to its credit a little bit. Some of the other Assassin's Creed games did as well, which is weapon combinations in combat. Now, in some games, you use your sword and you can't use your hidden blade in combat. However, with that hand free, you should be able to use some counter kills where you do in fact use your hidden blade in sword combat and mix like that. So say you have your hidden blade, like you stab somebody, then you pull out your gun and shoot them sort of thing in combat, and bring back the hidden blade combat as well, because that made sense because you had it there as a possibility. I say this as it made no sense that you could not use your hidden blades in combat as previous assassins have. It also made no sense how that the assassins didn't have combat that did mix the weapons a little bit, so you slashed with your sword, stab like that sort of thing. I mean, in Assassin's Creed 3, HATEFUL did that with a few moves. However, it should be more prominent. Not in every move, of course, but in any move where it seems like a good thing to use, then that, or maybe punches, stuff like that. It does, in counter moves, it does work, and in some attacks in combat, it does work as well, but not necessarily does it where you slash and then you bring your hidden blade across in an attack, that sort of thing, which would work. Overall, the combat is just getting worse and worse in the Assassin's Creed games, and it needs to go back to how it sort of was back in the original AC days, you know, sort of thing. With a bit more challenge to it and less tediousness than the recent games. Feel more fluent, feel more, you know, like alive, feel better and feel more solid and stuff like that. That's what it needs to feel like. And yeah, overall, I think that the combat isn't far off, but like, it does have a bit of a way to go. So thanks for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed episode 2 of Assassin's Creed Logic. Be sure to go ahead and leave a like, subscribe, share, comment. I'll see you all in the next one with another video. So yeah. So